Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're tearing into the critical special provisions of the Factories Act 1948. Specifically, we're looking closely at Chapter 9, Part 1, zeroing in on Sections 85 through 87A. If you've ever wondered how the law actually adapts to protect workers in bizarre setups, public institutions, or those really intense life-or-death hazardous situations, you are in exactly the right place.
All right, here's our roadmap for today. We're looking at redefining the modern factory, public institution exemptions, handling dangerous operations, emergency hazard shutdowns, and finally, protecting worker livelihoods. Basically, we'll be exploring how the government cranks up its legal intervention, scaling all the way from closing basic loopholes to executing literal life-saving emergency shutdowns. Let's start with Part 1, redefining the modern factory, and how the law brings small premises under its wing. Under Section 85, the whole traditional definition of a factory gets flipped completely on its head. Usually, you need 10 workers if you're using power or 20 without it, just to hit the regulatory radar, right? Well, here is the catch. By simply publishing a notice in the official gazette, the state government can step in and declare any tiny backyard workshop a factory, even if they fall way below those standard headcounts. It's a massive loophole closer. You can't just fly under the radar by artificially keeping your employee numbers low anymore. So, who actually takes the fall when the government flexes this power? Once a place is declared a factory under Section 85, the owner instantly becomes the occupier, and anyone working there becomes a worker under the law. And the legal wording here is incredibly tight. The term owner isn't just the person with their name on the deed. It literally includes a lessee renting the place or even a bank holding possession as a mortgagee. Plus, it doesn't even matter if the workers are directly employed by that owner or just there through some vague informal agreement. You absolutely cannot dodge legal responsibility with clever employment contracts. Now, there is one very strict exception. The only way the government cannot swoop in and declare a tiny shop a factory is if the manufacturing process is run entirely by the owner, solely with the aid of their family. We are talking a 100% true family business. The exact second you bring in a single outside worker, that exemption totally vanishes, and the full weight of Section 85 comes crashing down. Moving on to Part 2, public institution exemptions. This is where the rules bend a bit for education and research. Under Section 86, the law actually acknowledges that not all manufacturing happens in some giant commercial plant. Sometimes it happens in workshops attached to public institutions. So the state government has the power to exempt these specific places from parts of the act. But, and this is a big but, it only applies to institutions set up for 4 very specific things: education, training, research, or reformation. Think along the lines of a tech college's machine shop or a state rehab center teaching trade skills. Because they aren't out there chasing commercial profit, the law gives them a little breathing room. But hold on, here is the major caveat. The law draws a massive line in the sand. It explicitly states that absolutely no exemption can be granted from the rules regarding working hours and holidays. The state might let you slide on some technical paperwork or administrative compliance, sure, but when it comes to basic human rights like not being overworked and getting a day off, there are zero compromises. And this perfectly shows the tightrope the law walks. Let's say a research facility genuinely needs flexible hours, like maybe they're running a continuous 24/7 experiment. They can't just ignore the rules. The people running it have to submit a whole alternative scheme for hours, breaks, and holidays. Then, the state government actually has to review it and be completely satisfied that this new plan is not less favorable to the workers than the original strict rules of the act. The absolute baseline quality of life has to be fiercely protected. All right, Part 3, handling dangerous operations, managing the serious risk of bodily injury or disease. Section 87 gets into the gritty daily reality of highly dangerous manufacturing. If the state government thinks a process exposes workers to a serious risk of bodily injury, poisoning, or disease, they unleash a really rigorous 6-point checklist. First, they officially stamp the operation as dangerous. Then, they can outright ban vulnerable workers like women or children from that specific area. They can force periodical medical exams, and get this, the occupier has to foot the bill entirely out of their own pocket. They can set up protections for the surrounding neighborhood, restrict nasty materials, and demand specialized protective gear and extra welfare facilities. It's a heavy, heavy safety net forced onto dangerous industries. So Section 87 is great for managing hazards we already know about. It sets the baseline. But it leaves us with a pretty terrifying operational question. What happens when things go south fast? What if it's not a slow, long-term risk of disease, but an immediate get-out-now, life-threatening crisis?
That brings us to Part 4, emergency hazard shutdowns, the ultimate power to halt operations instantly.
Enter Section 87A. This is literally the climax of these special provisions. If an inspector walks in and sees that conditions in a factory, or even just one specific corner of it, might cause a serious hazard by way of injury or death to workers or the public, they can pull the plug immediately. They hand the occupier a written order detailing the exact hazard, and here is the real kicker. The inspector can legally ban the occupier from employing anyone in that area, period. The only exception is the absolute bare minimal crew needed to fix and remove the hazard. Production stops, lives come first.
Now, this isn't some unchecked permanent dictatorship. It's a highly structured, fast-acting intervention. Step 1, the inspector issues the written order. Step 2, that immediate shutdown is only valid for exactly 3 days. If the hazard is still there, we hit Step 3. The chief inspector has to personally review the situation and issue a new order to extend the shutdown. And finally, Step 4 ensures legal due process. Anyone who feels wronged by these orders always maintains the absolute right to appeal straight to the High Court. So halting operations definitely saves lives, but it immediately begs the next logical question. What happens to the workers' paychecks?
Which leads to our final section, Part 5, protecting worker livelihoods, shielding workers during emergency closures. Look, when an emergency shutdown hits, under Section 87A, the law makes absolutely sure the workers aren't the ones paying the price for the factory's unsafe conditions. While the factory is closed, workers are legally entitled to their full wages and all their standard benefits, no pay cuts. Furthermore, the occupier is legally obligated to provide alternative employment to those displaced workers wherever they can. And just to stop any corporate maneuvering, the law explicitly preserves all worker rights under the Industrial Disputes Act of 1947. The worker's legal standing is bulletproof, while the occupier completely absorbs the financial blow of fixing the hazard.
So, what's the big takeaway from all this? Chapter 9 proves that, legally speaking, workplace safety is absolutely not a suggestion. It is mandatory. From redefining what a factory even is under Section 85 just to catch tiny workshops, to forcing public institutions to respect working hours, all the way to executing life-saving instant shutdowns under Section 87A, these sections form an incredibly brilliant escalating legal shield. It's a framework built from the ground up to prioritize human lives over manufacturing output. And that leaves us with the really critical thought to ponder. We've just seen the jaw-dropping power the government holds here, from ripping away exemptions to forcing 3-day emergency shutdowns that totally cripple production but save lives. Knowing this ultimate authority exists, are factory occupiers genuinely being proactive enough with their safety standards? Or are they just crossing their fingers, waiting until the inspector is forced to knock on their door? Think about it. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the systems that keep us safe.